Welcome along to my latest Tamiya TT02 video. In today's video I'm going to be talking about the TT02 Type-S that I've been running in the SportsTC class in Bedworth's winter series. The Type-S is a bit of a hybrid car in that the backbone of the car, the chassis and the drivetrain is the same as the regular TT02, but the suspension is more of a race-derived suspension in that it looks similar to Tamiya's TRF type cars. Similar to the kind of touring cars we were racing maybe 10 years ago, with a C-hub type front suspension and a fixed rear hub on the suspension. So we didn't allow this initially in our SportsTC classes. We were a bit concerned it might have too much of an advantage over the regular TT02, but having seen a couple of people run it and not really have much of an advantage, we did start allowing it from this winter series. So a bunch of us have been running it. In today's video I'm going to cover a bunch of topics. I'm going to discuss the build of the car, the spec that it comes with, a few option parts that I've fitted. I'll discuss a bit more the differences between this and the standard TT02, and then I'll discuss how I've been getting on with it racing over the winter. So in terms of the spec of the car, that's one of the reasons we started to allow it in our SportsTC class. It's a very good spec out of the box, really good value for money. It comes with steel diff-out drives and steel dog bones compared to the plastic that you get on the regular TT02. It comes with plastic oil dampers. You'll see I've got alloy ones here, but the kit ones are a plastic oil-filled damper compared to just a non-oil damper on the regular car. It comes with 3 degrees toe-in out of the box, which is great for grip, makes for a nice, easy to drive car. It comes with adjustable camber all round and adjustable front toe-in. It comes with aluminium hexes, non-clamping hexes. These are clamping ones that I've fitted to make working on the car a little easier, but it does come with an aluminium hex compared to the plastic ones on the standard car. The suspension mounts are all metal, so metal pins, metal hangers at the front and the back, so nice and durable. So it's a decent spec out of the box. As I mentioned a couple of times there, I have fitted a few extra option parts to make it more robust and also a little easier to set up and work on. So the parts I fitted to this one are the Yeah Racing aluminium oil dampers. So these are the 55mm Yeah Racing shocks. I fitted Yeah Racing UJs on the front, mostly for robustness really, because on full lock with a dog bone there is a risk that they pop out of the C-hub. If you're on full lock and you catch another car or a corner, the dog bone can come flying out. Particularly on this car there's a lot of flex, a lot of movement in the front suspension. You can see it's very soft plastic, so the UJs are just a bit more durable. I fitted the aluminium steering at the front, again just more durable. When you've got ball joints threading into a plastic part, aluminium's a lot more robust and it's not an expensive option, so I fitted that. I've got the aluminium prop shaft and prop joints, mostly for durability. The plastic prop shaft isn't really up to the kind of speeds that we run in the SportsTC class. It's only a 21 turn brush motor, it's not that fast, but the plastic prop and joints are not really up to that. So I fitted those options. I mentioned I fitted the aluminium clamping hexes front and rear. That's just ease of working on really. The aluminium ones it comes with are okay, but they have a habit of dropping off when you take the wheels off. So the clamping hexes have a little screw in them, which allows them to clamp up onto the drive shaft so they don't fall off when you take the wheels off. So a nice cheap option part to make it easier to work on. And I've got the speed gear set and aluminium motor mount under here, which you can't quite see. The speed gear set is essential for allowing us to get up to the gear ratios that we run in SportsTC, and the aluminium motor mount is just for sort of cooling and rigidity. Make sure that you're not going to strip the gears. The plastic motor mount will flex a little bit more, so a nice cheap option part to make the car robust. Gear ratio wise, I'm geared at about 5.35 to 1. You'll have to get a calculator out to work out exactly what you'll want to gear that on. I think it's on a 68 spur, I think, 48 DP, 68 2 spur, and then I think 33 pinion somewhere around there. Gives you a rough idea of what kind of size gears you need to buy if you're putting a car together. I think that covers the main option parts that I fitted. The other things that I've done when I've built the car is I fitted machine screws, so M3 button head screws throughout, and countersink ones on the bottom, just to make the car easy to build. It goes together a lot more nicely than self-tapping screws. I hate self-tapping screws. These are just sort of from in my box. I've had, you gradually build up when you've been racing for years, but you can buy a set off the internet. X-ray servo saver. So we require a servo saver in our SportsTC class because it helps protect the suspension if you have a crash. The X-ray is by far the best of the servo savers you can get. Another good option is the Kimbrough Black servo saver, a lot cheaper and also does a decent job. A few of the little module spot I've done on the car. You can see I've mounted the front body posts on the bumper rather than on the shock tower, and that protects the body in a crash, as it means that the front posts are a lot further forward, so it helps protect the wheel arches. If you take a front impact, it sort of spreads the load. And then I've made up a little 3D printed bumper plate so that the car is still protected in a crash, because you have to remove the kind of the standard Tamiya bumper to fit the post like this. And then at the back I've removed the big ugly kit bumper, just a aesthetic thing really. I'm not a big fan of the kit bumper, and then just fitted a little plastic plate across the back instead to keep the hinge pins held in. I've got some of these little plates at the track if anyone's running a Type-S at Bedworth. I've got some of these little plastic plates if you want them, but it's the standard metal hinge pin holder under there, the 3-degree kit plate, which is a requirement for our SportsTC rules. I've replaced a few of the rod ends as well. The Tamiya ones that it comes with are really soft. They're okay, but when you're adjusting the camber and towing, I was finding they were popping off quite easily, and I was a bit concerned they might do that on track as well. So I've replaced them with a mix of different ones I'd got lying around in the box. They're a 4.8mm rod end, so I think Yokomo, ARC, I think use the same diameter, automatics as well, so any of those will fit. I think maybe these grey ones, I think these might be 3 Racing. I think they're all the same diameter. These are just a harder plastic, a bit more robust than the Tamiya ones, and they're also an open rod end, so you can get to them and take them on and off without having to pop them off, which means they'll last an awful lot longer than the Tamiya ones when you're working on the car. No performance to that, it's just more robust and easier to work on. When building the car, one of the things that I found most disappointing was the amount of slop in it. Even compared to the standard TT02, there was an awful lot of slop. The worst offending areas were where these aluminium bushes go into the chassis. Basically, these bushes were too small for the holes, and that's where the vast majority of the slop was. It was an easy fix. Basically, if you wrap some tape around the outside of the bushes, makes them a little larger, and then when they go into the chassis, they're a tight fit, which is what you want, as all the movement in the suspension should be the wishbone pivoting around the pin. The pin should be a tight fit into the bush, and the bush a tight fit into the chassis. So what I've used is some silver foil tape, which is about 0.1mm in thickness, but you can use insulation tape, fiberglass tape, anything that's about 0.1mm thick, wrapped once around the bush will get rid of that slop and make it feel, you see there's barely any movement there, make it feel a lot better than it does as kit. And same deal at the back. It's a little harder to see because at the back it's just that there's a little ball thing on the end of this bush, but the same deal, a little bit of tape wrapped once around that ball gets rid of most of the slop in the suspension. There's still a bit, as you can see, because there's a bit of movement between the wishbone and the pivot pin, but it gets rid of most of that slop. And then there's also a little bit of slop kind of forwards and backwards as the arm slides forwards and backwards along the pin. And to get rid of that, it's just a matter of getting some shims of the right thickness to shim that out. So 3 Racing do some steel shims ranging from 0.1 up to 0.3mm in thickness, and you just gradually put those on until there's just a tiny amount of forwards and backwards movement gone. You do still want some movement. You never want to get rid of all of the slop, as you definitely don't ever want the suspension to be tight. A bit of slop is always better than it being tight, but there was an excessive amount when I built the kit. both front and back. So getting rid of that just helps. It makes the car a little bit more consistent, a little bit less oversteery, I find, a bit smoother and easier to drive. That was probably the biggest disappointment building the kit, just the amount of slop, and once you get rid of that, it actually goes together pretty well. I would say it's a bit more fiddly to build than the regular TT02, particularly if you're new to racing. The suspension, that there are more parts to it, particularly on the front. You've got little top hat bushings which go into the C-hub, both top and bottom, which you have to get into the C-hub, and there's a shim here as well for good measure between the hub and C-hub, and then you have to sort of get all of those in position as you slide the hub into it and get the screws into the top and bottom. So it's a lot more fiddly than the suspension on the standard TT02. I've probably done this 1,000 times over the years. This is quite a classic suspension design that was around in touring cars for maybe 20 years or so. So I'm quite familiar with this. But if you're newer to racing, it will feel a bit awkward at first, getting all of these things in position and dropping it all into place without it all falling onto the floor. So it's certainly not as simple as the standard TT02. And then the other thing that's a bit awkward on this car is that the suspension is incredibly soft. I showed earlier the amount of flex in the suspension. It's the softest plastic I've seen on a touring car, I think, which is okay when you're out on track, as it means it's very durable. If you hit a barrier, it's far more likely that the suspension just sort of flexes rather than snapping. It's a lot softer than the suspension on the standard TT02. I've not seen anyone break any of these parts yet over the winter, even in quite cold conditions. So it's quite good from that sense. But when you're building it, you have to be really careful threading all of the screws into it, because it's very hard to tell when the screw's tight, because it's such a soft plastic. You won't get that nice feedback that you get when a screw tightens up into say aluminium or into a hard plastic. It will basically just keep turning and then strip, and then you've ruined it. So you have to be really careful tightening these screws up. Just going very slowly and sensing for the tiniest bit of resistance, and once you feel it, that's it, it's done. Don't go any tighter, particularly with these little grub screws in the C-hubs and rear hubs that hold the pins in place. They're only about 3mm long, so the amount of thread you've got in place is tiny, and particularly for a new builder, when you're first getting into this kind of thing, and you're maybe not that familiar with what screwing a thread into plastic feels like, it'd be really easy to strip these things and ruin the plastic before you've even run the kit. So I'd say it's maybe not quite such the introduction car to racing that the regular TT02 is. Maybe if you're brand new to racing, this might not be the place to get started, as I think it'd be quite easy to damage these plastics or to make some mistakes putting it together. But if you've maybe already run the regular TT02 or got started with an FTX Banzai, say, and you're looking for a second car, I think this would be ideal, as by that point you'll have already had a car apart a few times, and you'll feel what screws into plastic are like, and you'll probably be okay putting this stuff together, because it's not that complicated. Then as far as all the drivetrain goes, that's all exactly the same as the standard TT02, other than it comes with the metal outdrives out of the box. So that all goes together really nicely. I have to say, it's considering how cheap these cars are, the quality of the drivetrain is incredible. When I put the first one together, I was expecting to spend ages shimming it to get rid of play in the drivetrain, or to be having to sanding gears down to get it free. And you really don't. You literally just drop it together, and the mesh on the gears is perfect. There's no tight spots, no slop. It's incredible compared to the cars I used to run back in the 90s, shaft drive cars back then. This is really fantastic. Tamiya have done a great job on that. I don't know how they're able to do such a great job on the drivetrain and then the suspension be so terrible on slop. It's like two different teams have designed it and not talk to each other on what the tolerances should be. But yeah, fortunately the drivetrain is really robust, and I've not had any problems with that. Even at the start of the races, sort of holding the car on the line and doing burnouts, putting quite a lot of load on the drivetrain, you don't get any problems with gear wear or slipping or anything. It seems really good. So quite impressed with that. What else to talk about? Running a shorty battery in it, as you can see. I tried both a shorty and a full-size lipo in both the wet and the dry, and both times it felt better with the shorty and was faster on lap times with the shorty. The car is probably unbalanced with the Shorty, as I think, if you had to put the weight of all the electrics, it's probably heavier than that Shorty comes to. But overall, it was more nicely balanced with the Shorty. I think the full size lipo, even though it was probably only maybe 20-40 grams heavier than the Shorty was just better overall. I think it gives a nicer forwards to backwards weight positioning, and not significantly down on power. So yeah, overall this worked best. This is a 6400 Zombie lipo. It's a 7.6 high voltage. The lipo that I ran in fronty. So I just carried it over, and it's been working really well. I've been running that in all conditions. Ran it in the one dry meeting we had, set the track record on that, and then I've run it all winter. I just run one lipo all day, charge it back up. You take so little voltage out of it in this class. One lipo is all you need, it's plenty. And then I've ran the one motor all winter as well. Yeah, geared at about 5.3, 5.4. It still looks in good condition. The comm doesn't look all burnt up. All I did before racing it for the first time is I ran it just in the car, so with no wheels on. And a fan pointing at the motor. I just sort of turned the car on, pushed my trim forwards to sort of a 50% throttle or something like that, maybe 40-50% throttle, and just to let the brushes run in. I did that for maybe 10 minutes or so, just to help run the brushes in under low load. You can do all sorts of stuff with running in underwater and so on, but I couldn't be bothered with that. It seemed easy just to run in the car, and as long as you've got a fan on the motor so it's not getting hot, then you'll be absolutely fine. And I've done that, and it's ran fine all winter, wet and dry, no problems with that. In terms of how the car has gone on track, I've been really impressed with it. I haven't ran the standard TT02 on tracks. Unfortunately, I can't directly compare to that, but I've been amazed at how well the car has gone. The first meeting I did started off damp in practice. It dried up, so we had a couple of pashy runs, and then it went to full dry. And I've been most impressed with how little setup work you have to do from damp to dry. It's a lot less than you have to do on a modern full spec touring car. These cars seem to have a really wide setup window, which is nice. They make for a great entry level, low hassle class. All I've really changed from one set of conditions to another is maybe the shock angle a little bit. Or if there's a really big condition change on temperature, I might change the shock spring. That's it. I haven't been changing shock oils or anything major like that. It really has been very low hassle racing. That first meeting I did, I literally just changed the rear shock angle by one position when it went from damp to dry, and that was all that was needed to keep the balance right. It's been very easy racing. In SportsTC, we don't allow tyre warmers, we don't allow additives, so that's also a lot of hassle taken out of it, and I think also is probably part of why less setup work is needed. With no tyre additive, no warmers, you don't have quite as much bite in the dry as you might do in other classes, so you don't need to adjust the setup quite as much from damp to dry, which is nice. Maintenance and so on has been almost zero. I cleaned the motor every couple of meetings, just take it out of the car, spray it all out with brake cleaners to get any brush dust out, and then a little bit of light oil on the bush at each end. That's it as far as motor maintenance goes, and just a little bit of grease anywhere that there's metal on metal, so where the drive shafts go into the diff out drives, some grease there, same on the back. So at the back I'm running the kit dog bones, so there's grease on the inside and on the outside, and likewise on the prop joints. So you've got front and rear there. Obviously these are just aluminium parts, so I guess at some point these will probably start to notch as the steel pins wear the aluminium, but these are done all winter and there's no signs of any notching yet after 5 meetings, so they're wearing okay. I think the relatively low speeds and low torque of the motor is keeping wear to a minimum on all the parts. There's no issues yet of anything looking sort of worn or problematic. A few scuffs on the chassis from running curbs and running relatively low, looking at the wear at the back. But the great thing about these cars is everything's really cheap. An entire chassis is about £8, so should it start to look a bit worn, it's not an expensive replacement part. I think the wheels rub on the suspension arms. I think particularly the wets, they kind of dig in around here. I noticed after the first meeting, so I just dremeled that very slightly to reduce where they rub. Same on the back slightly, you can see there are some rubber marks there. What else is there to say about this? That's it really. I don't really have a huge amount of tips and tricks. Droop is one important thing on these cars. You can probably see how stuck up in the air my suspension arms are at full droop. They are kind of quite vertical, almost, well, actually above horizontal, I guess, maybe a better word for it. You want very little droop on these cars running on road on a smooth circuit. So I always measure droop over ride height when I'm running an unfamiliar car, unfamiliar class, because that carries over from basically any car to another car to any tyre. So I'm running about 2mm droop over ride height. So that means if I'm at 5mm ride height, which I am on this car, then when I start to lift the car up, it will get to about 7mm, and then if I lift it any more, the tyres will come up off the floor. So it's dead easy to check with the ride height gauge. You don't need any extra tools. You can just sort of kneel down on the floor, start lifting the car up, and with your ride height gauge, you just keep an eye on the chassis with the ride height gauge under it, and as it lifts up, you'll see it gets to about 7mm under the chassis, and then any further lift up off the floor, that's when the tyres come up. So that's how much droop I'm running. I think to get to that, I'm running about 3mm of plastic limiters inside the shock. So underneath the piston on the shock shaft internally, that's how much I'm limiting the shocks by to get to 2mm droop over ride height. So they're a 55mm shock, but limited to about 52mm in length. That seems about right. And then if you need to adjust it to get a little bit more droop, you can always just unscrew the rod ends a little bit to get a little bit more droop should you want any. But that's working about right for me. I find any more droop than that and the cars get a little bit inconsistent, a little bit sort of snappy under braking. They seem to transfer quite a lot of load, so reducing the droop helps that, both wet and dry. And I think that is it. Like I say, I haven't ran the standard TT02 on track, so I can't give a direct performance comparison. We have had a couple of people now change from the standard TT02 to the Type-S, and so far nobody's really made a jump up the leaderboard, which is good. It suggests the limit on performance really is more down to the motors, which is obviously controlled, tyres, which are a standard wet tyre in the winter, body shells, which you're all running similar kind of stuff, and driving ability. I don't think there's a huge gain in the Type-S from the suspension. While it looks a lot racier, I don't think it really goes any faster, maybe because it's got so much flex. While it looks quite racy, the plastic isn't the same as on the top race cars. It's a very soft nylon for both to save money, I think, and for durability. You can buy a complete set of four suspension arms for these for I think about £7, which is a tiny fraction of what the same shape arms but in a graphite material would cost. So I think that's maybe part of why this car, while it looks quite nice, in reality on track it doesn't seem to be a step forward over the base TT02. But it's still a really good value car, which is why we initially allowed it, as our previous favourite, the Type R, got discontinued. And trying to build up a decent race car from the base TT02 is quite expensive, as you end up sort of throwing probably over half the car away because it comes with plastic bushings, plastic everything. The Type-S is a lot better value. I've added a few option parts here on top of what the Type-S comes with, but in truth you can probably do without a lot of these. You don't need the aluminium dampers. The Tamiya plastic shocks are fine if you change the seals, which I talk about in my other video. You probably don't need the front UJs. I put those on because I was building a car from scratch. They were in stock, so I thought, well, I'll stick those on. It's one thing I'll never have to worry about. So you could probably run the car, I guess, probably if you built it with kit parts, but with the aluminium prop shaft, speed gear set, metal motor mount. You'd have a car built for still well under 200 quid plus your electrics, which is great value racing. Electrics are very cheap. I'm running the base Hobby Wing 1060 speed controller, as it was small, light and cheap. It has no adjustments other than setting it to forward and brake, and into LiPo mode. That's it. So there's nothing to think about on that. Yeah, I ran that because it's the cheapest one and seemed like it would do the job. When you see the speed controller rating of current, a higher current doesn't mean you're going to get more power to the motor. It doesn't work that way. A motor will determine how much current it wants. So a 21 turn will draw a certain amount of current, and then it's only a matter of can the speed controller supply that or not. And a 1060 can supply 60 amps, which is way in advance of what a 21 turn motor will want. So the 1060 isn't going to be a limiting factor on that. The 1080 may have a tiny amount lower resistance, but it's going to be insignificant compared to the amount of friction that you're getting in the drivetrain or the aerodynamic drag and so on. So the advantage of a more expensive speed controller is just basically non-existent. And I thought this was quite small and neat, fits in quite nicely, whereas the bigger speed controller is a bit more a challenge to fit. It's heavier and it's got a whole load of adjustments to figure out. So this seemed like a good call, and it's been working well. That's it, I think. I don't really have much more to talk about on this car. I've been really pleased with how it's gone over the winter. It's been a great deal of fun. We've got TT01s, TT02 Classic, TT02 Type-S. We've got some cartons, all running in the SportsTC class over the winter. We've had some really close racing. It's been a lot of fun. It's kind of like racing was maybe 20-25 years ago. Much slower speed than in the brushless classes. Really simple, no tyre warmers to deal with. The performance is really consistent from one meeting, one set of conditions to another. You only need one car because the conditions don't really affect the handling very much. So it's not like in touring cars where I'd have a wet and a dry car and then be having to change the setup massively if it goes through that patchy set of conditions. So it's really fun, low hassle racing with just a few little setup tweaks to get the balance right if there is a big temperature change. So I've really enjoyed it, and I definitely recommend these cars for anyone getting into racing or who just wants a lower hassle way of racing, which is why we opened up a SportsTC to any driver as well. We've got the F1 and F2 categories within it. F1 is open to absolutely anyone, no matter what your experience level. We thought we'd make SportsTC open to everyone, as it looks so much fun, and we've had a whole bunch of people now come to it over the winter and have fun racing it. Yeah, that's it. Any questions, feel free to reply to the video with it, or I'll link this video on Facebook so you can reply there as well, and I'll do the best to answer it, or pop along to the track and have a watch and maybe join in. Until next time, see you at the track.